Imagine a storm-lashed mansion on the moor, its windows turned to the sea. A granddaughter arrives to fulfill a 30-day residency and finds a letter saying the matriarch's death was no accident, a pillbox, and a packet of Foxglove. In the inheritance of secrets, suspicion threads through the rooms, silent villagers, sabotaged breaks and lights, and a house that keeps counsel. Stay with me, untangle the quiet betrayals. Chapter 1. The house that didn't know her. Wychmere House stood with its back to the moor and its face to the sea, as if it had spent a century watching for something that never came. The lane that led to it was barely a lane at all, 2 rutted tracks pressed into sodden grass, bordered by dry stone walls that leaned like tired men. Mara Ellery drove slowly, both hands tight on the wheel, wipers beating time against the glass. Rain slid across the windscreen in sheets that turned the world into a gray smear of gorse and slate. When the iron gates appeared, tall, black, and furred with lichen, she thought for a ridiculous second that she had taken the wrong turn and arrived at a place meant for someone else. Someone with money, someone with a family. The gate creaked open at the press of a buzzer she didn't remember seeing, and her car rolled forward onto a drive of slick stone. Wychmere rose beyond, an asymmetrical sprawl of wings and chimneys, pale against the storm, windows set deep like wary eyes. The smell in the air was salt and wet earth and the faint, sharp tang of iron from the cliff edge. She parked beside a low outbuilding that looked like a garage and sat for a moment, listening to the tick of the cooling engine. Her phone showed one bar that flickered uncertainly, as if even the signal had doubts about being here. 30 days, the letter had said. 30 consecutive days in residence before title transferred. She had read it 3 times at her kitchen table in Bristol, the paper softening under her fingers as if it had absorbed her disbelief. She had no grandmother, at least not one she had ever met. Her mother had spoken of her own family as if they were a closed door, then stopped speaking of them altogether. And yet, Wychmere House, remote estate, assets held in trust, condition of habitation. It sounded like a novel. It sounded like a trap. She pushed open the car door. Wind slapped rain against her face and drove cold up her sleeves. She hurried to the main steps, where a man waited beneath the overhang with an umbrella angled against the gusts. "Miss Ellery?" he called. He was tall, mid-40s, in a dark coat that looked too new for this weather. His hair was neatly cut, his expression a practiced blend of warmth and distance. Yes. Mara's voice came out thinner than she intended. Mara? Rowan Pike. He offered a hand. His grip was firm, dry despite the rain, as though he had been careful not to let the weather touch him. "Thank you for coming down. The roads?" He glanced back at the lane behind her, where water already pooled in shallow streams. "They can become difficult." He straightened his cuffs as he spoke, a small, habitual gesture, and she noticed cufflinks that caught what little light there was. Plain silver, no crest, no flourish. He held himself like someone used to rooms where decisions were made. "I almost turned around twice," she admitted. A flicker of something crossed his face, relief, perhaps, or calculation. "Many do. But you made it. Come in. Elsie will have tea." Inside, the house swallowed sound. The air was cool, carrying the faint sweetness of beeswax and the dry scent of old wood. Mara's shoes left wet prints on a tiled floor that had been scrubbed so often the pattern had softened. A woman appeared from a side corridor, wiping her hands on an apron. She was in her 60s, compact, her gray hair pulled back with a severity that matched her mouth. "Miss Ellery." Her gaze moved over Mara's damp coat, her cheap boots, her wind-tangled hair, with the blunt appraisal of someone who had spent her life taking stock. "I'm Elsie Mott, housekeeper." "Mara," Mara said again, as if insisting on her own name would stop her from dissolving into this strange place. Elsie's nod was brief. "Tea's on. Mind the step. One of the tiles lifts." She didn't soften it with a smile. Mara followed Rowan into what must have been the entrance hall. A wide staircase rose at the far end, curving up into shadows. Along the wall hung portraits in heavy frames, men with severe eyes, women with pale throats and composed faces. Their gaze seemed to follow her as she moved. On a console table sat a vase of flowers. Foxglove, tall and bell-shaped, the purple heads spotted like bruises. Their color looked wrong in the muted hall, too vivid, as if someone had brought a piece of summer inside to defy the season. Mara slowed. Those are in memory, Rowan said, as if that explained it. Violet liked them. They grow wild along the cliff. The blooms were fresh, but one stalk seemed oddly bare at the top, as if a head had been snapped off. Pretty, Mara said, though something in her tightened. Foxglove was beautiful, in the way some things were beautiful because they didn't care if you touched them. From somewhere deeper in the house came the low growl of a generator, steady but strained. Rain drummed against the tall windows. Rowan led her into a kitchen that managed to feel both large and used. A black range took up one wall. A long wooden table sat under a hanging rack of pots. The kettle on the stove began to whistle as if it had been waiting for her. Callum Reed came in through a back door at the same time, bringing in a gust of wet air. He was younger than she expected for a groundskeeper, late 20s maybe, lean with a stubble-shadowed jaw. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He kept his hands in his pockets as he nodded her. "Miss Ellery?" he said, and looked down immediately after, as though eye contact cost him. "Callum keeps the grounds," Elsie said. "What's left of them in this weather?" Callum's gaze flicked briefly to the table where a small stack of mail lay, then away again. A nervous habit or a practiced one. Elsie set a cup in front of Mara, the china thin enough to show the shadow of tea through it. Mara wrapped her hands around it for warmth. On the counter beside the kettle sat a plastic pill organizer, one of the weekly kind, with the days stamped into the lids. The compartments were empty, cleaned out, but a strip of masking tape still clung to the top. Someone had written AM and PM in pencil. The PM looked darker, as if it had been overwritten to correct an earlier mark. Elsie noticed Mara looking and slid the organizer into a drawer with a quick, almost protective motion. Rowan took the chair opposite, folding his coat neatly over the back, straightening those cuffs again. "Before we discuss the estate," he said, "I want to offer condolences. I know this is unusual. Violet Sorrel had a private nature. She didn't speak much of family, but she made her intentions clear." The name sat between them like a stone. Violet Sorrel, her grandmother. How did she... Mara started, then stopped. How did she find me? Why now? Why after death? Rowan's expression did not change. She did her own research. You'll find she was thorough. Elsie's mouth tightened. She began to clear something that wasn't there, wiping the already clean table with a cloth. "And the condition," Mara said, 30 days. Rowan nodded. 30 consecutive days in residence. It's stipulated in the will. The title transfer is contingent on the condition being met. If you leave before the 30 days are complete. "Then what?" Mara asked, though she already knew. He slid a document across the table. It was printed on thick paper, his firm's letterhead at the top. "The property passes to the Greywater Heritage Trust," he said, as Violet arranged. Mara read the line twice. Greywater Heritage Trust. It sounded benevolent. It sounded like a museum gift shop and polite donations. "And who runs that?" she asked. Rowan hesitated just long enough for her to notice. "It's chaired by the parish council." Elsie's cloth paused. Callum's shoulders shifted as if he had heard something he didn't like. "Chaired by Kara's Vale," Rowan added, and the name landed with the soft certainty of a closed circle. As if summoned, a knock sounded at the kitchen door. Before Elsie could reach it, it opened, and a woman stepped in without waiting. She was in her 50s, with carefully styled hair and a coat that looked expensive in a way the village weather couldn't ruin. She carried a folder under one arm and a pen in her hand. The pen cap clicked once, twice as she smiled. Mara Ellery. Her voice was warm, her eyes sharp. "Welcome to Greywater." Rowan stood. "Caris." "I couldn't stay away," Caris Val said lightly, as if this was a social call and not an intrusion. "Not when Violet's granddaughter has come home." Mara stiffened at the word home, but Caris had already moved closer, extending a hand. Her nails were perfectly manicured. Her grip was cool. "I'm sorry for your loss," Caris said, and the condolence sounded rehearsed like a line in a play. Violet was a presence. Wychmere is part of our coastline, part of our history. Mara glanced at Rowan, unsure whether this was his doing. His face had smoothed into neutrality. "We'll be handling the legalities," he said. "Of course." Caris's pen clicked again. "I'm not here to interfere, only to offer support. We're a close community, you'll find. We look after our own." The phrase made Mara's skin prickle. It wasn't the kindness of it, it was the ownership. Elsie set an extra cup on the table without being asked. Her eyes stayed on Karis, wary but controlled. Callum shifted his weight. His hands remained in his pockets. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the kitchen window. For a second, the generator's growl wavered, then steadied. Mara took a slow sip of tea. It was strong, slightly bitter. She thought of her Bristol flat, the peeling paint by the radiator, the envelope of unpaid bills on the counter. She thought of the way Rowan had said many do when she mentioned turning back. They expected her to run. "I'll be staying," Mara said, setting the cup down with care. "I intend to meet the condition." Karis's smile remained, but something tightened around her eyes. "That's admirable. Brave, even. Wychmere can be lonely in winter." "It's autumn," Mara said. "Not here," Elsie murmured, almost to herself, and Mara wasn't sure if it was a joke or a warning. Rowan cleared his throat. "We should show Miss Ellery to her room. She'll need to settle in." Mara stood, her legs stiff from the drive. As she followed Elsie out of the kitchen, she caught one last glimpse of Kara's veil tapping her pen against the folder, the click faint but persistent, like a clock counting down. In the hall, the foxglove stood tall in its vase, purple bells facing inward. Mara passed it and felt, irrationally, that the house was holding its breath. Chapter 2. A death with two neat edges, Elsie led Mara up the main staircase. The wood creaked under their feet with a slow, deliberate complaint, as if it resented being disturbed. "You'll have the east guest room," Elsie said. "Violet kept it ready. She didn't like things. Unsettled." "Did she know I was coming?" Mara asked. Elsie did not answer immediately. She paused at the landing, turning to face Mara. Her eyes were pale and direct. "She knew more than people thought," she said finally. "That's all." The room Elsie opened was larger than Mara's entire flat. A high ceiling, a four-poster bed, a bay window that looked out toward the cliff. Beyond the glass, the sea was a flat sheet of pewter, broken by white lines where waves struck rock. Mara set her bag down by the bed. Her clothes suddenly felt too small for the space. "The bathroom's through there," Elsie said, gesturing. "Water pressure's fickle if the wind gets up. If you need anything, ring. There's a bell pull." Mara looked at the faded cord beside the fireplace, the tassel worn smooth. "Thank you," she said. Elsie's gaze lingered on Mara's face for a moment, as if searching for something, then she left, closing the door with a soft finality. Mara stood alone in the quiet. The house made sounds of its own. A distant knock of shutters, the low hum of the generator, the murmur of rain against stone. Somewhere far below, a door closed. The noise traveled through the walls like breath. She unpacked slowly, placing her toiletries on a marble sink, hanging a damp coat on the back of a chair. She tried to imagine herself here for 30 days, tried to imagine calling this place hers. It was easier to imagine being swallowed by it. After a shower that alternated between hot and icy without warning, she went downstairs. She found Rowan in a sitting room off the hall, checking his phone with increasing irritation. "Signal comes and goes," he said as he caught her glance. "The cliff interferes, and the weather." "Does the landline work?" Mara asked. Rowan's mouth tightened. "Sometimes." He put the phone away and gestured toward a door at the far end of the corridor. "Violet's study is there," he said. "You have full access, of course, though I would advise caution with papers. There's a lot." "I'm a copy editor," Mara said. "Paper doesn't frighten me." And his smile was brief. "This might." He left soon after. "I'll be in the village this evening if the road allows," he said, and Mara watched him shrug into his coat with the neatness of a man who never lost control of his surroundings. Karis Vale had already gone, her pen clicks fading like a receding tide. Mara waited until the hall was empty before she approached the study door. It was locked. The brass knob turned only a fraction. She frowned. Rowan had said she had access. She found Elsie in the kitchen, kneading dough with strong, efficient hands. "The study's locked," Mara said. Elsie's hands did not pause. Violet kept it locked. Habit. "Do you have the key?" Elsie reached into a drawer without looking and produced a ring of keys. There were more than Mara expected, the metal worn shiny in places. Elsie counted softly under her breath as she flipped through them, 1, 2, 3, then selected a small brass key and held it out. "Bring it back," she said. "Doors in this house stick if they're left open. You'd think it wanted privacy." Mara took the key. The metal was warm, as if it had been held recently. She hesitated, then asked, "How did Violet die?" Elsie's eyes lifted briefly. "In her bed. Quiet." "Heart attack?" Elsie's jaw tightened. "That's what they said." Who's they? Elsie returned to her dough. People who talk. Mara left before the question could grow sharper. The key turned in the study lock with a reluctant click. The door opened onto a room that smelled of ink and old books and something faintly herbal, crushed leaves left too long in a drawer. A desk sat beneath the window, its surface cluttered but not chaotic. Stacks of letters, a leather-bound notebook, a fountain pen laid precisely on a blotter. The chair was pushed in as if someone had just stood. Bookshelves lined the walls. In the corner, a small safe was set into the wood paneling, its dial glinting. Mara stepped in and closed the door behind her. The quiet felt thicker here, as if the walls had learned to keep secrets. On the desk was a framed photograph turned face down. Mara lifted it. A young woman stared back at her, dark hair, a straight nose, eyes that held a wary defiance. Behind her, a cliff edge in the sea. The photograph had been taken years ago. The colors faded. Mara's breath caught. The woman looked like Mara's mother in her 20s. But the face had been scratched, gouged by something sharp, the eyes scored until they were a blur of white paper beneath the emulsion. Mara set the photograph down carefully, as if it might cut her. She opened the leather-bound notebook. The handwriting inside was neat, slanted, controlled, violets, presumably. Dates ran along the top of the pages, lists of plants, notes on tides, names that meant nothing to Mara. In the margins of several pages, small circles had been drawn, radiating lines like crude suns. Halos. It was an odd detail, a child's doodle, except the rest of the notebook was too precise for whimsy. The halos repeated, always near the days marked with a small asterisk. Her gaze caught on an entry near the back, felt unwell after tea. Lights looked wrong, yellow around the edges. Mara frowned. She had heard vaguely of medications that could do that, or poisons. Her stomach tightened at her own thought. She forced it away. She reached for a stack of papers beside the notebook. Letters, mostly, some unopened, some folded, some written in the same neat hand. One sheet lay on top, not folded, the ink still dark. It was unfinished. Mara's name, written by someone she had never met, felt like an intrusion. Her throat tightened. She read on. If you are reading this, it means I have done what I could from this side of the door. I am sorry for the years between us. I am sorrier for the reason. The next lines were crossed out, then rewritten. Do not believe the village when it speaks with one voice. They have practiced it. They have rehearsed it. A pact is not a thing of paper. It is a thing of mouths that stay closed. Mara's fingers trembled. She read faster. There is a woman who clicks her pen when she lies. She called herself my friend. She offered to sort my pills when Elsie's hands were swollen. She made it all look so neat. Too neat. Mara's gaze flicked instinctively to the hall beyond the door, as if she might hear that faint click even now. If I die before I can tell you myself, know this. I did not die by accident, and if you stay, if you can bear the house long enough to make it yours, then you will have what I never did. A place where the truth cannot be buried by other people's silence. The letter ended there, the final line unfinished, the pen trailing off into a thin scratch. Mara stared at the page until the words blurred. Not a heart attack, not quiet, not natural. She set the letter down and pressed her palm to the desk to steady herself. The wood was cool beneath her skin. Outside, the rain intensified. Wind battered the window, and the glass shivered in its frame. A sound came from upstairs. It might have been the house settling. It might have been a door closing. It might have been a footstep, light and careful. Mara froze. She told herself it was Elsie or Callum moving about. She told herself she was alone here in a house full of empty rooms, and fear made noises out of nothing. But the sound came again, closer, a soft scuff, then the faintest creak. Mara's gaze flicked to the study door. She moved silently, crossing the room in 2 quick steps, and pressed her ear to the wood. Silence. Then, a whisper of movement, like fabric brushing a wall. Mara's heart thudded painfully. She lifted the key from her pocket, gripped it like a weapon, and yanked the door open. The corridor beyond was empty. But on the runner carpet, dark shapes marked the fabric, wet footprints, elongated by motion, leading away toward the staircase. Mara stared. The prints were narrow, the stride quick. Whoever had made them was already gone. She followed them to the stairs. The house beyond was dim, the overhead lights humming faintly. The generator's growl had shifted to a higher pitch. At the bottom of the stairs, the footprints stopped. as if the person had lifted their feet and vanished into air. Mara swallowed. She forced herself to climb, each step careful, each creak loud in the quiet. The landing above was empty. The guest rooms stood closed, their doors aligned like teeth. At the far end, a door was slightly ajar. Mara moved toward it. Her palms were slick with sweat. Before she reached it, the lights flickered. They dimmed, brightened, dimmed again, then went out entirely. Darkness swallowed the hall. The generator's growls stuttered and died. For a split second, there was only the roar of wind and the hammer of Mara's heartbeat. She took one step backward instinctively, and her heel caught on the edge of a rug. She pitched sideways, arms flailing, and for a terrifying moment she felt nothing beneath her feet but air and the drop of the staircase. Her fingers caught the banister. Pain shot through her wrist as she slammed against the wood, half hanging, half standing on the edge of the steps. She clung there, gasping, while the darkness pressed in. Somewhere below, a door slammed. Mara forced herself upright, gripping the banister until her knuckles whitened. She fumbled for her phone, turned on the torch. The beam cut a narrow tunnel through the dark. The rug had been shifted, pulled just enough to catch a foot. She stared at it. It wasn't an accident. It was too precise. The smell of crushed leaves reached her then, sharp and green, as if someone had brushed past Foxglove with wet hands. Mara swallowed hard. The letter in Violet's study burned in her mind. Do not believe the village when it speaks with one voice. Downstairs, someone moved in the dark. Mara backed toward her room without taking her eyes off the corridor, the phone light trembling in her hand. Outside, the storm closed around Wychmere House like a fist. Chapter 3. The village that spoke in unison. Morning arrived grudgingly, a pale smear of light behind cloud. The sea beyond the east windows was a darker gray than the sky, as if the world had been dipped in ash. The power returned sometime before dawn with a shudder and a groan. Mara slept in fits, waking at every sound, the scrape of branches against stone, the thump of shutters, the distant clack of pipes warming. She went downstairs early, drawn by the smell of coffee and the need for another human presence, even one she didn't trust. Elsie stood at the range, stirring porridge with brisk strokes. Her hair was pinned tighter than yesterday. She looked up as Mara entered. "You slept?" Elsie asked. "Not much," Mara said. "The power went out." Elsie's expression remained flat. "Generator's old. Wind makes it sulk." "The rug at the top of the stairs was moved," Mara said. She kept her voice steady, watched Elsie's face. "I nearly fell." Elsie's spoon paused. For the first time, something like anger flashed through her eyes. "The house has rugs," she said. "Rugs shift." "Not like that." Elsie set the spoon down with a deliberate clink. She wiped her hands on her apron. Then, very quietly, she began to count under her breath. 1, 2, 3. Mara realized it wasn't counting steps, it was counting patience. Elsie looked up. "This house has been empty since Violet died," she said. "Empty houses make people nervous. They see things." "I saw footprints," Mara said. Elsie's jaw tightened. "Callum's been in and out. He tracks mud." "They weren't boot prints," Mara said. "They were narrow, like shoes." Elsie's gaze flicked away for half a second toward the back door, then back. "Eat," she said, and pushed a bowl toward Mara as if feeding her would fill the gaps in her fear. Mara ate because she needed to, not because her stomach wanted it. The porridge was hot and bland. Outside, rain still lashed the windows, though with less violence than the night before. Rowan Pike arrived mid-morning, damp-haired, his coat speckled with rain. He looked displeased, not by the weather but by what it represented. "The lane's worse," he said as he stepped into the kitchen. "A section near the lower wall has slipped. You can still drive up and down if you're careful, but if the rain continues..." "So we're stuck," Mara said. Rowan's mouth tightened. "Temporarily." "Convenient," Mara said before she could stop herself. His eyes flicked to hers, sharp. "Pardon?" Mara held his gaze. "Violet wrote a letter," she said. "She said she didn't die naturally." Silence dropped into the kitchen. Even the rain seemed to pause, held at bay by the weight of the words. Elsie's hand froze on the edge of the counter. Rowan's expression shifted so subtly, Mara might have missed it if she weren't watching for cracks. His face smoothed, became professional. "Miss Ellery," he said carefully. "Violet was an elderly woman with known health concerns. Grief and shock can distort perception." "It wasn't my perception," Mara said. "It was hers." Rowan exhaled through his nose. He straightened his cuffs. Where is the letter? Mara hesitated. In her study, on the desk. Rowan glanced at Elsie. Did you know about it? Elsie's mouth tightened. Violet wrote plenty of letters. Most she never sent. Rowan looked back at Mara. We can't leap to conclusions. If you have concerns, we can speak to Dr. Patel. He signed the certificate. Mara's stomach clenched at the idea of walking into the village and asking questions that would make her a threat. But she needed facts. She needed something solid. Bring him here, Mara said, if the road allows. Rowan hesitated. The village is tense. People don't like trouble. Then Violet was right, Mara said. Rowan said nothing more, only turned and left, the door closing behind him with a soft final click. Mara spent the next hour in Violet's study again, reading and rereading the unfinished letter, tracing the lines as if the ink might reveal more if she stared long enough. She examined the notebook margins, those small, repeated halos, and the line about light turning yellow at the edges. She opened drawers. Receipts, tides, a ledger of names with amounts beside them. At first she thought it was charity. Then she noticed the repetition. The same surnames year after year, the figures steady as rent. Silence paid for annually. She found a note in Violet's hand, written in the margin of one page. Paid again. Still no peace. Near noon, a knock sounded at the back door. Mara heard the pen click before she heard the voice. Miss Ellery? Karis called, and then she was in the kitchen again, rain shining on her coat, as if weather had tried and failed to touch her. Rowan trailed behind her. With them came a man in his 30s with dark hair and tired eyes. He carried a medical bag and looked as though he would have preferred to be anywhere else. Dr. Sanjay Patel, Rowan said. Doctor, this is Mara Ellery. Dr. Patel offered a hesitant smile. I'm sorry to meet you under these circumstances. Karis moved to the table without being asked. She clicked her pen. Rowan said you had questions. It's natural. Loss does strange things. Mara's gaze locked on the pen. Click, click. Violet wrote she didn't die of natural causes, Mara said. Dr. Patel's smile vanished. His hand went to the bridge of his nose. He rubbed it as if trying to smooth away a headache. Miss Ellery, he began. Violet had a history of cardiac issues. She reported palpitations. She was on medication. She wrote about yellow halos, Mara said. She slid the notebook across the table, open to the entry. Is that normal with heart problems? Dr. Patel's eyes flicked down. He read. The skin around his eyes tightened. It can occur with certain medications, he admitted quietly. Digoxin, for example. Digitalis, Mara said. Foxglove. Karis's pen paused for half a heartbeat, then clicked again. Dr. Patel's gaze lifted to Mara's face, then darted to Rowan, then to Karis. He seemed to shrink slightly under their combined attention. I didn't prescribe digoxin for Violet, he said quickly. Her medication was... What did you put on the certificate? Mara asked. Dr. Patel's fingers tightened on his bag strap. Cardiac arrest, heart failure. And did you consider poisoning? Mara asked. Karis gave a soft laugh, too light. Really, Mara, in a village like this, Violet was old. She had health issues. It's horrible, but it's life. Mara looked at Dr. Patel. Did you see her body? He hesitated. Yes, he said finally, voice low. Briefly, there was no sign of injury. She looked peaceful. And you didn't request an autopsy? Dr. Patel's gaze dropped. He rubbed the bridge of his nose again. In cases like this with an elderly patient, if there's no suspicion... There was suspicion, Mara said. She wrote a letter. Dr. Patel swallowed. I wasn't shown any letter. Rowan cleared his throat. Violet's death was upsetting for everyone. The village wanted things handled. Karis leaned forward. Her pen clicked softly. We didn't want strangers prowling through Wychmere, turning grief into gossip. Violet wouldn't have wanted that. You didn't know what Violet wanted, Mara said. You know what you wanted. For a moment, Karis's smile tightened into something sharp. Then it softened again, polished back into place. I'm trying to help you, she said. You're alone here. This house is enormous. The weather is terrible. Wouldn't it be better to stay in the village for a few nights? We have a guest room at the vicarage. Father Luke. If I leave, I lose the house, Mara said. Karis's eyes flicked just briefly toward Rowan. Her pen clicked. The clause is harsh, Rowan said. Violet wrote it, Karis said smoothly. Her choice. Mara's gaze went to Dr. Patel again. Doctor, she said quieter, if someone had slipped digitalis into her pills, would it look like a heart attack? Dr. Patel's throat moved. It could, he admitted. It can cause arrhythmia, nausea, visual disturbances. Yellow halos, Mara murmured. Dr. Patel nodded once, reluctantly. Mara forced herself to breathe. Thank you, she said. That's all I needed. After they left, Mara returned to Violet's study. Behind the door, half hidden, a notice board held old village rotas and flyers. A sheet dated the week Violet died read, Caring Circle Visits. Initials were scrawled beside days. Some she didn't recognize, some she did. EMFL. And on Wednesday, CV Mara stared until the letters seemed to burn into her vision. In the corridor behind her, Callum appeared and stopped short when he saw her. Elsie said, you might want help, he muttered. His hands were still in his pockets. Mara's gaze dropped to his boots. Wide tread, muddy, not the narrow prints from the night before. Where were you last night? She asked. Callum's eyes dropped. Out back, securing the greenhouse. Wind was bad. All night? He swallowed, then pulled one hand from his pocket. A silver spoon flashed before he shoved it back. Mara's breath tightened. You're stealing from the house. Callum's shoulders sagged. I'm not proud. I'm just... in debt, Mara guessed. He nodded once, sharp with shame. It's stupid. It's just things. Nobody lives here now. I live here, Mara said. Callum's face flushed. I didn't mean... Mara held up a hand. Did you ever handle Violet's medications? She asked. Callum blinked. No, Elsie did. Sometimes Karis would bring meals. Or Father Luke. But I didn't. Mara watched him weighing. Theft was one thing. Murder was another. Leave the silver, she said finally, and tell me if you see anything else, anything strange. Callum hesitated, then nodded, relief and fear mixing on his face. He left quickly, boots thudding down the hall. Mara went back to the desk and looked again at Violet's unfinished letter. Do not believe the village when it speaks with one voice. Outside, the storm kept speaking, wind, rain, sea, loud enough to drown out everything else. Inside, the house waited. Chapter 4. Foxglove in the potting shed. By afternoon, the rain eased into a steady drizzle that felt less like an attack and more like endurance. The sky remained low and heavy. The wind still prowled along the cliff edge, but its anger had dulled into watchfulness. Mara stood in the garage, staring at her car, and tried to talk herself into leaving. She opened the driver's door and sat hands on the wheel. She pressed the brake pedal. It went down too far. Her stomach dropped. She pumped it again. The pedals sank with a soft, sickening give. Mara got out and knelt beside the front wheel, peering beneath the chassis. One section near the wheel well glistened oddly. When she reached up and touched it, her fingers came back wet, not with rainwater, but with something oily. Brake fluid. She rose slowly, cold spreading through her chest. Someone had done this while she slept. She went inside and found Elsie stacking tins in the pantry with a precision that felt like prayer. My brakes are cut, Mara said. Elsie froze. For a second, the stern composure cracked. Fear showed beneath it, old, deep, and familiar. Elsie set the tin down carefully. You're sure? Mara held up her stained fingers. Brake fluid and a cut line. Elsie's mouth tightened. Lock the doors, she said, all of them. So you believe me now, Mara said, bitterness sharp in her voice. Elsie's gaze held hers. I believe the house, she said quietly. It tells on people if you listen. Mara swallowed. I need proof, she said. Something that isn't a feeling or a letter. Elsie stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Come. She led Mara out through the back door into a courtyard sheltered by stone walls. Rain dripped from gutters. The air smelled of wet soil and rotting leaves. Beyond the courtyard, a greenhouse rattled softly. Beside it stood a low shed with a slanted roof. Elsie selected a key from her ring while counting under her breath, then opened the shed. Inside, the air was warmer, thick with the scent of earth and dried herbs. Shelves held terracotta pots, seed packets, jars of labels. A workbench ran along one wall, stained dark by years of use. Violet kept her plants here, Elsie said. She called it her medicine cabinet. Mara's eyes fell on a folded paper tucked beneath a trowel. She pulled it out, a parish newsletter dated the week Violet died. Wrapped inside were dried leaves and stems. Foxglove, even dried. It held its shape. Thin leaves, a brittle stalk, the remnants of purple bellheads. Mara's throat tightened. Why is this here? Elsie's face was grim. It wasn't here last month. Beside the bundle lay a small paper packet with a handwritten label, for the heart. The handwriting was neat, rounded at the edges, with a distinctive loop on the H. It was not Violet's sharp slant. Mara stared, mind reaching backward. Karis Vale in the kitchen, pen in hand. Her notes, her confident curves. "That's her writing," Mara said softly. Elsie's eyes narrowed. "Karis?" "Yes." Mara's voice shook with cold anger. "She's been here." Elsie's lips pressed thin. She came often near the end. "Said she was checking on Violet. Said she cared." Mara looked around the shed. Tools, twine, a pegboard of shears, a watering can with murky water, nothing else disturbed. "Why leave it?" Mara whispered. "Why not destroy it?" Elsie's gaze slid away. "People don't always think their hands can be traced," she said. "They think the village will cover what the village wants covered." Mara put the packet in her bag and the dried foxglove in a plastic container from the shelf. "I'm not letting it be covered," she said. Outside, Callum stood in the courtyard, cigarette cupped against the wind. He startled when he saw her. "I left the silver," he said quickly, "in the drawer." Mara nodded. "Good, Callum. Did you see anything last night?" Callum's eyes darted toward the lane, then back. "I saw Karis' car," he said, voice low. "After dark, headlights off, thought she'd gone home, but it was there." Mara felt the pieces shift, slotting into place. "Callum," she said, "does she have keys?" He nodded once. "Keys to Wychmere. Rowan gave them to her. Heritage inspections. And keys to the garage and the generator shed." Mara's blood ran cold. She gripped the container in her hands until the plastic creaked. "Be careful," Callum said, and for once he looked at her directly. "She won't stop now." Chapter 5. The page in the cookbook. The generator failed again just after midnight. Mara knew because she was awake when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then died, plunging the room into darkness so complete it felt like being buried. For a moment there was only the wind and the sea and the hard thud of her heart. She reached for her phone and switched on the torch. The narrow beam picked out the chair jammed under the door handle, the pale outline of the bedpost, the curtain moving slightly in a draft. She listened. Footsteps faint below. A door opening. The soft clink of something metal. Mara's grip tightened on the phone. She slipped out of bed and crossed the room barefoot, every floorboard cold against her skin. She pressed her ear to the door. Silence. Then a sound like a match striking. Mara's mouth went dry. If someone was using flame in a house full of old wood and dry paper, it meant either desperation or intent. She pulled the chair away from the door, opened it carefully, and stepped into the hallway. The corridor was black, except for her phone's thin light. Shadows pooled in corners. The portraits on the stairwell walls seemed to lean closer, hungry for movement. At the bottom of the stairs, she saw another light, a candle flame wavering in the kitchen doorway. Elsie stood there, holding a candle in one hand, a kettle in the other. Mara exhaled sharply, relief flooding her so hard her knees went weak. "Elsie," she whispered. Elsie's face was carved by the candlelight into deep lines. Her eyes were sharp. "Stay there," Elsie said. "Don't come down too fast." Mara paused on the last step. "What happened?" Elsie's mouth tightened. "Someone's been in the generator shed," she said. "It's not sulking. It's been made to stop." Mara's stomach twisted. Karis. Elsie didn't answer. She set the kettle on the range and lit the burner with a practiced hand. The gas hissed softly, then caught. "We need to talk," Elsie said. Mara stepped into the kitchen. The air smelled of candle wax and damp wool. Outside, rain tapped at the window, almost polite now. The storm was easing, but the house felt tighter than ever. Elsie poured hot water into 2 mugs. She didn't bother with china. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the kettle down. "You hid things from me," Mara said. "About Violet?" Elsie stared at the flame for a moment as if it held answers. Then she began to count under her breath again, 1, 2, 3, and spoke. "I hid things because you looked like you might bolt," Elsie said. "And if you bolted, they'd win. They'd take this house and turn it into whatever suits them. Violet didn't want that." Mara's throat tightened. "What did Violet want?" Elsie's jaw worked. "Your mother's story told," she said quietly. And the village's silence broken. Mara froze. "My mother." Elsie reached into a cupboard above the range and pulled out a cookbook. It was old, the spine cracked, pages stained with butter and ink. She opened it to a section of handwritten recipes and slid a folded sheet of paper from between 2 pages. "Violet's diary page," Elsie said. "The one she tore out. She made me promise to keep it safe, to keep it from eyes that would burn it." Mara's pulse hammered. "Why didn't you give it to me?" Elsie's eyes were fierce, because giving it to you meant you'd know, and knowing might make you leave. You've lived without Greywater's ugliness. I didn't want to hand it to you like a stone. And now? Mara asked. Elsie's gaze flicked toward the dark window. Now they're cutting brakes and killing lights, she said. If they're willing to do that, you need every stone you can hold. She held out the page. Mara took it with trembling fingers. The paper was thin, old. Violet's handwriting slanted sharply across it. I remember the night like a bruise that never fades. Mara's breath caught. She read. They said the baby was still. They said it kindly, like a mercy. The midwife wouldn't meet my eyes. Father Harrow prayed too quickly. I heard the sea through the window and knew the world kept moving, even as mine stopped. Mara blinked hard and kept reading, but I saw the nurse wrap her too carefully. I saw the way her chest rose, small as a bird's breath. I was 17. They thought me stupid with pain. Mara's hands shook. They took her before dawn, told me it was best. Told me no one would want a girl like me stained by scandal. They said the family would pay. They said the village would be kind if I was quiet. Mara swallowed, throat tight. I was quiet for a year. Then I stopped. That is why they hate me. Not because of what happened, but because I would not let it stay buried. At the bottom of the page was a list of names, added in a darker ink later. Caris Vale, Father Luke Harrow, Rowan Pike. Mara's stomach lurched. Elsie's voice came low. Those names were added years after, she said. Not from the night itself, from the years after. People who kept the silence going. Mara's mind reeled backward through her own childhood, her mother's sudden silences, her refusal to discuss family, the way she flinched at village churches on holiday. Secrets had shaped her life without her seeing them. Mara looked up. My mother was the baby. Elsie nodded once. Violet never found her in time, she said. Not properly, but she found enough. Enough to know you existed. Mara's fingers tightened around the page until the paper crinkled. And Violet died because she wouldn't stop, Mara said. Elsie's face hardened. Violet died because she threatened the wrong people, she said, and because she let the wrong person touch her pills. Mara thought of the Caring Circle rota, CV on Wednesday. The neat label, for the heart. The overwritten PM, digitalis, Mara Foxglove. Elsie's gaze met hers. Violet told me she saw yellow around lights, she said. She thought it was age. Then she wrote it down. She started to suspect. But by then, it was already in her, Mara finished, voice shaking. Elsie nodded, jaw tight. And Dr. Patel? She shook her head. He's a good man. But he's new. He didn't understand Greywater's pressure. They told him it was natural. They made it easy to believe. Mara set the diary page down carefully and forced herself to breathe. We have to confront them, she said. Elsie's eyes widened slightly. Confront them and do what? They'll deny? The village will deny with them. Then we make them slip, Mara said, and the idea came with a sudden clarity that steadied her. We make one of them afraid enough to act. Elsie's gaze sharpened. How? Mara looked toward the drawer where Elsie had shoved the pill organizer on her first day. By making them think the evidence is leaving Greywater, Mara said, and by watching who tries to stop it. The power came back a few minutes later with a low, resentful hum. The overhead lights flickered on, harsh after candlelight. Mara's phone showed no signal. The landline was dead, but the storm had eased. In the morning, the road might be passable again. Outsiders might come. Mara tucked Violet's diary page into her bag with the foxglove packet and the dried bundle. She did not tell herself she was safe. She told herself only that she had reached the part of the story where fear became direction. At dawn, she asked Elsie to send word quietly to Dr. Patel and to Father Luke that she needed them at Wychmere by afternoon. Callum she asked directly to come too. Rowan came on his own just before lunch, damp from the lane, irritation etched to his face. You can't start accusing people, he said as soon as he saw Mara in the hall. Not here. Not without. Without what? Mara asked. An autopsy? A confession? A village that doesn't close ranks? Rowan's mouth tightened. This isn't a courtroom. Mara stepped closer. You drafted the clause, she said, the one that hands Wychmere to the Greywater Heritage Trust if I leave. Rowan's eyes flicked, a quick tell. His hand went automatically to his cuffs. Violet requested it, he said. Caris benefits from it, Mara said. She chairs that trust. Rowan's jaw flexed. It's meant to preserve the house, or control it, Mara said. Rowan's gaze hardened. Miss Ellery. Mara, she said, and her voice was flat now. My brakes were cut. The generator was sabotaged twice. Violet wrote that someone sorted her pills too neatly, and Karis Vale's handwriting is on a packet of Foxglove hidden in the potting shed. Rowan stared at her, the smooth professionalism slipping for the first time into something like alarm. Where is that packet? He asked. Mara heard the question for what it was. Not concern, but calculation. Safe, she said. Rowan's eyes narrowed. Be careful, he said, and for a moment his voice sounded human, not legal. You don't know what you're stepping into. I think I do, Mara said, and I'm still stepping. Chapter 6, The Inheritance of Secrets. By late afternoon, the rain had thinned to mist. The wind eased enough that gulls returned to the cliff face, their cries sharp against the quiet. Mara chose the drawing room for the gathering. It was the warmest room in the house, with a hearth of dark stone and 2 high-backed chairs that looked as if they had once hosted people who believed they owned the world. The curtains were drawn against the gray light, and a single lamp cast a pool of gold on the polished table. She set out 6 chairs. Then she laid her evidence where everyone could see it. On the table, Violet's unfinished letter, the Caring Circle rota page with the initials, the diary page Elsie had hidden in the cookbook. Beside them, the plastic container with the dried foxglove bundle. And next to that, the small packet labeled For the Heart. She placed the packet close to the hearth, near enough to the fire that it might look like an accident waiting to happen. Elsie stood by the door, arms folded, her face set. Callum hovered near the window, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. Dr. Patel arrived first, looking exhausted, eyes darting around the room as if expecting someone to leap from behind a curtain. Father Luke Harrow came next. He was older than Mara expected, late 60s, with a gentle face that might have been comforting in another context. He wore a plain ring on his right hand and kept turning it with his thumb. Rowan arrived and took a seat without being invited, expression guarded, cuffs already straight. Karis Vale arrived last. She entered as if she owned the room, coat immaculate, folder tucked under her arm, pen in hand. The cap clicked once as she looked around and took in the chairs, the documents, the container. Mara, she said warmly, what is all this? A sense? Mara didn't smile. Sit down, she said. Carrie's eyes narrowed slightly, but she sat, crossing her legs with careful ease. The pen rested in her fingers like a small weapon. Mara waited until the room was still. Outside, the sea murmured. Inside, the house listened. I'm going to tell you what happened to Violet Sorrell, Mara said. Her voice was steady because she had said the words in her head a dozen times already. And then I'm going to tell you why someone tried to kill me. Dr. Patel's face tightened. Father Luke's fingers paused on his ring. Callum's gaze dropped. Rowan's jaw flexed. Karis's smile stayed bright. This is absurd, Karis said. You're grieving. You're frightened, you. Violet wrote to me, Mara said, and tapped the unfinished letter. She said she didn't die by accident. She said a woman who clicks her pen when she lies offered to sort her pills when Elsie's hands were swollen. The pen in Karis's fingers stilled. That could be anyone, Karis said lightly. Plenty of people click pens. Mara looked at her. Not here, she said. Not when the room is quiet. She slid the Caring Circle rota across the table so everyone could see it. This is a visit ledger, Mara said. The Caring Circle rota pinned behind Violet's study door. It lists who visited Violet the week before she died. Dr. Patel leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Rowan's gaze flicked to it. Quick, Mara pointed to Wednesday. CV, she said. Father Luke's hand tightened on his ring. Elsie's voice came flat. Karis visited that day, she said. She stayed for tea. Karis lifted her shoulders in a small shrug. Of course I did. Violet was alone. I was being kind. You were being careful, Mara said. She opened her bag and pulled out the plastic pill organizer Elsie had shoved into the drawer on Mara's first day. Elsie's eyes widened, then narrowed. She didn't object. Mara set the organizer on the table. Violet used this, she said. Weekly pills, simple, easy, the sort of thing people rely on. She pointed to the masking tape label. AM, PM, pencil. She let her finger hover over the PM. And this, she said, has been overwritten, darker, corrected, as if someone had to change what was there. Dr. Patel's gaze sharpened. That doesn't prove tampering, he said quietly, but the certainty wasn't in his voice. No, Mara agreed. It proves someone was careful enough to correct their own mistake. She turned the diary page toward them, the one Elsie had hidden. "This is Violet's account," Mara said. "Of the night a baby was taken from her and declared stillborn. Of the village agreeing to stay quiet. Of money paid to keep mouths closed." Karis' smile did not falter, but the skin around her eyes tightened. Father Luke swallowed. His thumb rolled the ring again. Rowan's eyes were fixed on the paper, expression unreadable. "Those names at the bottom," Mara said, voice steady, "were added later. The people who kept the silence going." She looked directly at Karis. "Your name is there." "That is a grieving old woman's scrawl," Karis said, and now there was something sharp in her voice. "You can't. You can't deny you were here," Mara said. "You can't deny you had keys." Callum shifted, then spoke, voice low. "She has keys," he said. "To the house, to the generator shed, to the garage." Karis's gaze snapped to him cold. "Callum," she said, as if he were a dog that had bitten a hand it depended on. Callum's face flushed, but he didn't look away. Mara continued before Karis could redirect the room. "Violet started seeing yellow halos around lights," Mara said, and tapped Violet's notebook. "A known symptom of digitalis toxicity. Digitalis is derived from foxglove." Dr. Patel's mouth tightened. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, then stopped himself as if aware of his own tell. "Digitalis can look like heart failure," Mara said. "You told me that. Nausea, arrhythmia, sudden death." Dr. Patel stared at the table, shame creeping into his expression. Mara lifted the small paper packet. This was hidden in Violet's potting shed, labeled for the heart. She held it up. "It's not Violet's handwriting, it's yours." Karis laughed, but the sound was brittle. "That's ridiculous. You're a copy editor, not a handwriting expert." "No," Mara said, "but I watched you write. I watched you make notes in my kitchen, the loop on your H, the way you cross your T like you're underlining your own certainty." She set the packet back on the table, close to the hearth again. "Violet wrote you offered to sort her pills," Mara said. "You had the opportunity to swap one dose. One evening pill. Easy, neat, the sort of thing no one questions because it looks like care." Father Luke's ring turned faster. Rowan's voice came tight. "Mara," he said, "you need to stop. This is—" "You drafted the clause," Mara said, not looking away from Karis. "If I leave, Wychmere goes to the Greywater Heritage Trust," chaired by Karis Vale. Rowan's face hardened. Violet requested a barrier," Mara said, "a condition that kept outsiders from taking the house the moment she died. She did not request sabotage." She lifted her hands. "My brakes were cut, the generator was sabotaged, the rug on the stairs was moved. Each thing pushed toward the same outcome, me leaving." She leaned forward slightly. "That's the second part of this," she said. "After Violet died, someone needed me to run so the trust could take Wychmere without the complication of a granddaughter who might talk." Karis's smile was gone now. Her pen clicked once, sharp, then stopped. "You have no proof I cut your brakes," she said. Mara nodded. "Not the way a courtroom would want," she said. "Not yet. But I have enough to make it dangerous for you." She let silence sit for a beat, heavy and deliberate. "Tomorrow," Mara said, "if the lane holds, I'm driving. Carefully, not in this car, to the nearest station. I'm handing these papers over, Violet's letter, the rhoda, the diary page, the foxglove packet. I'm asking for Violet's death to be reviewed." Dr. Patel's eyes widened slightly. Father Luke's hand froze on his ring. Mara kept her gaze on Karis. "And I'm calling a journalist," she said. "Someone who likes village scandals and old secrets. Someone who will put Greywater's name in a headline." Rowan's jaw tightened. Elsie's expression didn't change. Karis' eyes narrowed to slits. For a moment, her calm looked like it might shatter. "You can't do that," she said softly. Mara didn't answer. She watched. Karis' gaze flicked to the hearth, to the packet labeled "For the Heart." The pen in her hand clicked once, twice. Then, with a sudden smoothness, Karis rose. "This is hysterical," she said. "I won't sit here and be accused in my own community." She moved toward the hearth as if to pace, as if needing air, and in that movement her hand dipped. Fast! Too fast to be casual. She snatched the packet from the table and turned toward the fire. Mara's blood turned to ice and then to heat all at once. "Karis," she said sharply. Karis's fingers were already opening the packet. The dried contents inside, crumbly, dark, spilled into her palm. "Don't," Mara said, voice rising. Elsie moved in a blur, faster than Mara thought possible for her age. Callum lunged too, but Elsie got there first. She grabbed Karis's wrist and twisted. Carys gasped, the packet slipping. The contents fell, scattering onto the hearth rug. For a fraction of a second, the room was perfectly still. Then Carys tore her wrist free and stumbled back, face flushed with fury. "You," she spat. "You don't know what you're doing." Mara stepped forward. Her voice was quiet now. "You just proved what I needed," she said. Carys's chest rose and fell quickly. Her eyes darted around the room, calculating again, trying to rebuild the smooth surface. "I was protecting Violet," she said suddenly, voice trembling with a practiced kind of emotion. "She was ill. She was obsessed. She was going to destroy herself in the village with lies. I tried to keep her calm. I tried to." "You tried to keep her quiet," Mara said. Dr. Patel's face had gone pale. He stared at the spilled contents on the hearthrug as if seeing his own failure made physical. Father Luke's ring slipped under his thumb. He whispered, "Carys." Carys's gaze snapped to him. "Don't," she hissed. "Don't you dare act righteous now." Mara's voice stayed steady. "You visited Violet on Wednesday," she said. "You offered to sort her pills. You swapped one dose with digitalis Foxglove because it would mimic heart failure. No autopsy. No questions. And when I arrived, you tried to make me leave so Wychmere would revert to the trust you chair." Rowan's face was tight with something that might have been dread. "Carys," he said quietly, "stop." Carys's eyes flashed. "You drafted the clause," she snapped. "Don't pretend you're innocent." Rowan flinched as if struck, but he didn't deny it. Mara looked at Dr. Patel. "You signed the certificate," she said, "because they made it easy." Dr. Patel's throat moved. He began, then stopped, shame swallowing the rest. Mara looked at Father Luke. "And you knew," she said, "about the baby, about the pact." Father Luke's shoulders sagged. "I knew of arrangements," he said, voice rough. "I told myself it was mercy. I told myself silence was kindness." Mara felt grief flare, sharp and unexpected, not for Violet, whom she never knew, but for her mother, whose life had been shaped by a lie spoken by a roomful of adults. Carys laughed again, brittle. "You think this will fix it?" she said. "You think truth makes things clean? It doesn't. It ruins. It stains everyone." "It already stained everyone," Mara said. "You just kept it in the dark." Carys's gaze flicked to the door, to the window, to the lanes beyond as if plotting escape. But the room was full of bodies, and the house was full of locks. In the distance, faintly, a sound rose, a vehicle engine grinding up the lane. Elsie's eyes lifted. "They're here," she said. Mara's stomach twisted, half relief, half fear. "Who?" Rowan moved to the window and looked out. "Police," he said, voice clipped. "I called this morning when you told me about the breaks." Mara stared at him. "You did?" Rowan didn't look at her. "I'm a solicitor," he said, as if that explained everything. "I know what happens when people start burning evidence." Carys's face went white. She took one step backward toward the door, but Callum moved, blocking it. His hands were still in his pockets, but his shoulders were squared now. "No," Carys whispered. Mara's voice softened, not with mercy, but with finality. "Yes," she said. "It ends." The knock at the front door echoed through the hall like a gavel. When the officers entered, damp and wary, Mara watched Carys Vale's composure crumble. She did not scream. She did not collapse theatrically. She simply looked for the first time like a woman who could not click her way out of consequence. Mara gave them the papers, the rota, the letter, the diary page, the Foxglove packet, and what remained of its contents. She watched Dr. Patel speak quietly to an officer, his shoulders bowed, and Father Luke sit with his hands folded, the ring finally still. By the time the police left with Carys, the sky outside had begun to clear at the edge, a thin line of pale brightness on the horizon. The house was quiet in a different way then, not holding its breath, but letting it out. Later, when everyone else had gone, Rowan to make calls, Dr. Patel back to his patients, Father Luke to a church that suddenly felt too small, Mara stood at the front steps. The sea below Wychmere was calmer, though still restless, waves rolling in with a slow, persistent rhythm. The cliffs smelled of wet stone and salt, clean in the wake of storm. Elsie stood beside her, arms folded against the chill. "You'll stay?" Elsie asked. Mara looked back at the house, at the dark windows, at the Foxglove still standing in the hall, Purple Bells quiet now, no longer a memorial but a warning understood. 30 days, Mara said. Elsie nodded once, as if that was the only answer worth having. Mara felt the weight of Violet's letters in her bag, the weight of a story that had been pressed into silence for decades. She felt fear still, but it had changed shape. It was no longer fog. It was a line on a map. She stepped back inside. Wychmere House did not welcome her, but it did not reject her either. It simply stood old and watchful while Mara Ellery, granddaughter, inheritor, reluctant witness, began the work of living in it long enough for the truth to belong to her.